All right. My name is Chris Campbell. I'm a practicing CPA and I work with small businesses and individuals to help pay the least amount of taxes possible while keeping them out of jail. So today I want to talk a little bit about the hospitality industry and particularly the restaurant business. So I recently started working with a number of restaurant clients. And one of the biggest issues that come to play with the restaurants are paying out tips. I've recently learned about how the tips work because it's not paid out like your typical hourly wage or salary wage. So I wanted to share how tips and wages are paid out and what the calculation is and my thoughts on some of the practices with that. As many of you know, when you go to a restaurant, you pay out tips for service and those eventually wind up in the hand of the server. So it's pretty straightforward if you leave cash. Usually if you leave cash, the server takes their tip and more than likely they put it in their pocket. But we're moving more and more towards a cashless society. Many folks now are paying on card or some of the other payment platforms, your Zells, your Venmos, those type of things, but mainly credit card. And then when you're paying with credit card, that needs to be sorted out when the employer pays that server. So one of the biggest departures I saw from a traditional employment situation where you're paying by the hour is that servers or anyone that gets tips, they can apply what's called a tip credit. So by law, everyone must make the minimum wage according to their area, their state. Many of the clients I've been working with, they're in New York City. The minimum wage there for food service is $15 an hour. And actually that's going up because this might not be published until 24. And that's actually going up to $16 an hour. But because many servers work on tips, as an employer, you can get what's called a tip credit towards that 15 or $16 an hour. Currently, that tip credit is $5 an hour. So when you bring on a server and you decide to pay them that hourly wage, you can actually pay them $10 an hour with the expectation that they'll make up the remaining $5 per hour of tips. By the time they make all of their tips, and then you calculate everything on an hourly basis, if they're relatively busy, then the total pay should shake out to at least $50 an hour. Now, the catch here is that if for whatever reason they don't hit that threshold, then you as the employer have to cover the difference. So let's say you're paying $10 an hour, if the individual works 2 hours, they need to make a minimum of $30. So let's just say for whatever reason, they worked 2 hours, but they only made $5 in tips. With your hourly rate, $10, they made $20 from your pay rate, and they made another $5 tip. So that's a total of $25. Now, to meet minimum wage requirements, they need to make at least $30. So that $5 difference, you as the employer need to cover that. So if you're not busy or you got folks on staff, it can get pretty expensive for you because as the owner, now your costs get blown up because you're now paying more per hour for your labor than you had anticipated if your tips are short. So you want to make sure that you're doing what you can to them to stay busy, but it can also be a measurement of how effective that particular server is. Let's say that you are pretty busy and for whatever reason, that server is not making or covering what they're doing in the hour, because then it can identify a bigger problem. And that's also assuming that the place is relatively busy. Obviously, if they're sitting in a restaurant or serving in a restaurant that's empty, obviously they have no opportunity to make those tips. But if you are relatively busy, if there's enough work for them and they're not covering what they're supposed to cover, it could indicate a bigger problem. Either the service is too slow so that you're not doing enough turnover so that the servers can sit their requirement, or could just be providing bad service. Now, what I'm seeing a number of restaurants do is a concept called tip pool, as opposed to a server essentially keeping everything to themselves that they've generated. It's what's called a tip pool. And as it says, all the tips are pooled between all the servers, whether it be a particular shift or a particular day. All the tips are pooled, and the tips are then distributed to each person based upon A, the amount of hours that they've worked, and then B, a point system based upon their position. So usually tipped workers are those that work the front of the house. So your servers, your bartenders, the runners, anyone that you see working when you go to a restaurant. So exclude all kitchen staff. They're not a part of the tip pool. But anyone that you see out in front, running around in the restaurant, they're usually included. Each position gets assigned a certain percentage of points, and based upon the amount of hours that individual works, then the higher that assignment may be, without getting too far into what that calculation is. The advantages of that is that it can encourage a team environment where everyone's motivated to do well and provide service, and everyone gets the benefit from the service of others. So that's one benefit. Another is that it won't severely put a disadvantage on those servers that work on off-peak times versus those that work on peak time. Obviously, restaurants are more busy in the evenings and weekends. And if someone knows that they can make way more tips working on those peak hours, then you may have people that only want to work on those hours. And then you may have a hard time finding people to work on the off time. The tip pooling, I see, would discourage something like that from happening, and folks would have a problem working through the off-peak times. So that's definitely a pro from that. A con that I see from that is that I've yet to see it, and I guess we'll see how it shakes out, but I'm sure it does occur. I would also think that it may cover up or hide, to an extent, those servers that might be a bit weaker and not providing quality service. I think have those people on your staff, something like this kind of covers that up. Just like in any circumstance or any job, you're always going to have stronger performers and you're going to have weaker performers. Is it a disservice to those that are stronger? Is it an extra benefit to those that might be weaker? I would say try to identify where the weak links might be. Even if you are running a pool, you got to dig into your data and look at the percentages. A lot of the POS systems will point this out, and look at the percentage of tips based upon each person. That way you're not biased by who's busy, who's not. So don't necessarily look at the total amount that each person has brought in. Because again, there are a number of factors in there as far as when they've worked. One might have worked at a busier time than any other. The key metric here is to take a look at what the percentages were of the tips during that particular time. I'd probably look at that. And then I'd probably also take a look at tip per hour work, but mainly the percentage of the tip versus all their bill and what's the running rate. That way, even if they are working on a slow time, they're still providing good service. The tip percentages should be higher. If you see it's on the lower end, then that could be a sign of someone that's not necessarily performing. If you're going to go the tip pool route, that's an internal metric that you should track, because you still want to make sure that everyone on the team is pulling their weight. And it can be a bit deflating to those that are a very high performer and they know that their earnings are getting diluted by a number of weak performers. So that's all for now. I hope this helped. If you have any more questions about this topic or any other tax kind of related questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help. So that's all for now, and I'll see you on the next one.